Watch the ride.
Hey everybody, hope you're all doing alright out there. So, 3D printing. If you're watching this, I imagine you may have considered getting a 3D printer, and you may have not done that and gone, maybe it's a bit too expensive, maybe it's a bit too complicated. You know, it can stop you doing that little jump into starting a new hobby or learning a new skill. I was in the same position for a very long time. I've been interested in 3D printing for years. In fact, the very first 3D printed thing I ever saw was this golden toilet. This was printed by one of my subscribers and sent to me because in a video I was talking about something and I said, look, I might want a golden toilet, but it doesn't mean I can have one. And then they sent me a golden toilet, so I have one. I knew about 3D printing when I was sent this, and this is years and years ago now. But when I saw it, I was like, that is amazing. That is such a breaking change in production, you know, for small scale stuff and for just building anything really. So as the years went by, every now and then I'd look at this and think, I wonder how much the machines are, I wonder how much they are, and they're all very expensive. But about 3 months ago, when it started raining, and it hasn't really stopped raining since, I decided I'm going to make the plunge and I'm going to buy myself a 3D printer because they were so cheap compared to what I'd seen them in the past. And this one has a good review, whereas in the past, if you saw one for like 300 quid, it was terrible and you had to completely build it yourself and it was a nightmare to, you'd have to almost learn coding. So as I say, about 3 months ago, I took that dive and I have managed to do so much stuff in such a short amount of time. And it's been so much fun and it's so easy now and it's not expensive and the printers are easy to work on, and I really do think that if you were considering starting 3D printing as a hobby, for something to do, if you enjoy painting models or something like that, then we really are a very good time to start, because the machines are now about 200 quid. Of course you can spend much more than that, but I'm going to show you all the things that I've printed and talk about the things I've learned and do a basic overview of what 3D printing is, to remove any of the confusions that might put you off, to calm some of those nerves, and maybe help you make the leap into starting 3D printing, because it is really good fun and it's actually really useful. So 3D printing is an additive manufacturing technique. Basically that means that you are building something by adding material, not making something by removing it, like with milling. You take a big block of aluminium and then you take away all the parts that aren't the part you want. With 3D printing, you only put the parts there that you want. So if you don't understand them, 3D printers might seem complex or complicated, but in reality, it's a hot glue gun on an arm that goes where you tell it to. That is it. You could imagine quite easily how if I heat this glue up and I made a little square like this and allowed that to cool and then did another square on top of it and so on and so forth, it would build up that square. Well, this is a hot glue gun for filament, such as this. And that is basically a 3D printer. Yes, there's a lot more parts to move it around, but in reality, this is the thing that builds it. This is your welder and your material. How it moves around is dependent on what it's attached to. And just to answer the question that I'm sure some people are asking now is, why have you got a heat block covered in PLA? It failed on the top here and started spewing out everywhere. Replaced under warranty. So the 3D printer I ended up going with is a Creality Ender 3 S1. The reason I went for this one is because I say it was dirt cheap and the reviews on them is pretty good. But what I will say here is, if you buy a cheap printer, don't expect it to work flawlessly. If you want something like that, you have to spend a bit more money. Not necessarily a huge amount, maybe more like £500-600. And you're going to have a more reliable machine that's just going to kind of just do it. Things like this are great because they will go wrong occasionally. Like as I say, the heat block on mine started leaking plastic everywhere. I could take it apart without manual. It came apart easily because it's designed to. I contacted Creality several times over a few weeks, and eventually they got back to me, and eventually they got me a part. This is not sponsored by Creality in any way, shape or form. Your customer service is good, but it takes way, way, way too long. It takes too many attempts to get through. I was in a live chat with them once, and the dude just went quiet for about 8 minutes. And I'm like, hello? And he went, oh, sorry, I had to take a call. There's supposed to be 5 of us in today, and now there's only 3. Previous to that, I thought it was some sort of AI bot. It's not. There's just a few people spread very thin. Creality, that's something you really need to work on. But I like your printer. In ways, you could say this is like the Chinese motorcycle of the 3D printer world. Yes, it's going to go wrong occasionally, but it costs a lot less, and at least you're going to learn how to fix it. There's value in that. So very quickly, the anatomy, as it were, of a 3D printer. If we just push the bed back in, we can do that because it's off. This up here is your filament spool. Your filament is the material you're building things from. You can get this in every different type of colour and texture and configuration you can think of. There are 3D printing filaments with bacon in them, with wood in them, with titanium in them, with everything you can think of in them. But generally, if you're just printing stuff at home, PLA is the stuff to go for. A reel of it is about 16, 17 pounds, and you'll get a lot of prints out of that. On this machine, we have a filament detector, which just basically, if the filament ran out up here, when it pulls through this little block, it goes, oh, I've run out of filament, and it will stop. That gives you the opportunity to splice in a new piece, to extend the print, or change the filament. Basically, it gives you opportunity to not fail the print, because you're going to run out of material before it ends. So that filament comes down into the head, and as I say, this is just a hot glue gun that can be told where to go. The heat block is in there that melts it. You've got a little extruder, which basically is a wheel that just pulls the material through and pushes it through the nozzle. You've got a fan on there to cool the plastic down as it's laid down, so it can put the next layer down quicker. And on this one, it's got a thing called a CR touch, which basically means it just touches the bed in about 16 different locations to check where it's flat, and then it can account the print to make sure it prints flat. Then you've got the build plate, which is a removable piece of material. On this one, it's magnetically held down, which is where you print directly onto it. Depending on the type of material you have, sometimes it's like gold, sometimes it's like black. This one is a PEI I've just recently started using, Creality's own one, and wow, the prints off it are really nice, and it comes off like a dream. Then underneath that is you have the heat bed, because this whole plate is heated to a certain temperature. Normally, this plate will be about 60 degrees and the hot end will be about 200, depending on your materials and what you're doing and blah, blah, blah. But mine normally always runs on 200 and on 60. This bed can move forwards and backwards. The head can move left to right on this arm, and the arm can move up and down. So that's your XYZ axes. And there's an SD card slot down here, and you basically put your print file on that card, tell the machine to print, and it will print. And it will just make this most amazing thing right in front of your eyes. Now, anyone who knows anything about 3D printing went, well, it doesn't always go well. No, it doesn't. And that's one of the fun things about 3D printing. If you do your diligence to make sure everything's set up correctly, you're really likely to get a good print. If you don't, you're likely to have problems. Now, all you have to set up for these is basically the height of the bed from the nozzle, because that distance is really important for the simple things. I know if people are watching this who do 3D printing lots, there is obviously a myriad of adjustabilities, but for someone who's just coming into this, we want them to not be scared off by it before they get nerded out and want to go diving into those menus. Let's just give them the basics. The way you make sure it's level is in each corner of the hot plate there is a wheel which lifts it up and down, and you basically put the machine into a position that you can fit a feeler gauge in between the two, and you wind the wheel up and down to make sure that it's the same height from the nozzle all over the plate. You then can tell the machine to level itself if it's got a CR touch like this, where it will then double check if it's level, and now it knows that, it can print. As I say, as long as you make sure your bed is actually level and you regularly do that auto leveling check, not that it's going to change anything, it's just going to account for it, you will be much more likely to get successful prints. So I'll just turn this on so you can see. A thing few people seem to talk about in 3D printing videos, for beginners anyway, is to warn you of the noise. They are quite noisy. You 100% would not want this in your bedroom printing when you're trying to sleep. It's not really, really loud, it's the fans, the whining of the motors. You would not want to sleep in the same room as this. Now, if you can do that, good for you. You're a sounder sleeper than me. So just so it moves around, I'm going to level it using the auto leveling. And you can see here, that's auto homing. It's going to some limit stop switches to see where front and back is. Now it's put its little probe out. It's going down. There you go, it's touched off and it's gone. That is where the surface is in general, so I don't ram the nozzle straight into the bed. And now it's going to do little checks all the way along, backwards and forwards, to make sure that it knows what the overall levelness of this surface is. And there you go, it's leveled itself out and it would be ready to print at this point. And all you have to do to print is go to the print menu, press print, and then you've got a list here of your files. These are the things, the models you've loaded onto the SD card that you can print. Once it's printing, it's going to give you an estimated time remaining, which is it's dependent, and it gives you a bit of a readout, and you can also adjust things as it's printing to try and improve the print. But generally, what you want to do is test and test and test to get your printer with the PLA you have printing nicely, and then let a print just go. It's like spray painting. The end product is all about the preparation. So the question is, how do you get those files and how easy is that to do? Now, one of the great things about 3D printing is it's such a community-based thing, and so many things are available for you to get and use for free. You can't necessarily sell them or anything like that. It depends on the creative licenses, but the amount of stuff out there for you to just use yourself is huge. The files you'll normally be working with are called STL files, and this is a very well-known website, Thingiverse, and as you can see here, these are all models that you can download the files for and print. So if we look at the most popular of all time, of course, the classic Benchy. This is a benchmark item that you can print to see how well your printer's doing. I have never printed one of these. And I've not printed one of these either. I've tried to not do the cliches. I'm not saying that's a cliche. I know it's designed for a reason, but I felt like, I think 3D printers, they can deal with a Benchy now. So you've got, you've got all these different sorts of things here, models and functional things, and that is one of the things you'll do when you start printing. You'll want to print everything. So maybe you'll look at functional things, maybe you're more interested in models. I'm interested in both, and I like printing and painting things. So I'll show you some of those in a minute. So if we look at some of the other things on here, it is a kind of nerdy area, 3D printing, so you will find lots of, models and things to games. So there's all sorts of things here that you can print, and there is many different websites where you can get files. Equally, you can easily make your own STL files if you just need functional parts, and I will show you something I built to make a model. This is somewhere where I want to highlight a bit of an issue in the world of 3D printing. So we've got this file here for a palm rest throttle holder. It's, you put it on your throttle, and as you lean on it, it means you don't have to hold the grip, you can just press your hand on it. Now, I don't really like these things anyway, the real ones, but the idea of having one 3D printed just seems like a bad idea because this will want to snap. And I know they're going to they've shown here that you should print it this way so the lines go that way because it would more likely want to snap on that line, but there is nothing stopping this just bending. Not saying that it will if you use the right filaments and stuff like that, but people can print it out of anything and try and use it. Don't think it's a great idea. But let's show you what would happen should you want to print this thing. So hit download. So we've got our files, we've extracted them. If you go into images, you can see, if I move it over, there you go, you can see what the part is. And this, we can view it as a 3D object. Okay? Now this is where I think there is a big divide in people who do 3D printing. There is a lot of people who will take this file, put it onto the machine and just print it. If the file's set up correctly, it will work perfectly. If it isn't, it won't. And without being able to look at things and customize things, you won't get the best results out of your printer, really. But as I say, I think there's a lot of people who like the idea of having a 3D printer that they don't even really need a computer. They can just download the file on their phone, put it on an SD card, and print it on their machine. The alternative to that is that you put it through a slicing program, a slicer, and this one is Cura. It's free. I use this one. You set it up for your machine, and then you just drop the part into Cura. So now we can see it's in Cura, and this is a thing that we can print. In this box is all your adjustables and options as to how your 3D printer is going to print things. This is a very basic front page of hundreds of options. But I will say here, if you put in your machine, generally what the presets are will work great because they have been used, modified, updated, and got to be good. But you will probably want to tweak things here and there, like how much infill, as in, you don't always print something completely solid. It might be honeycomb inside, structure sort of thing, and then you can choose what sort of density you want depending on what the part's going to do. We have the option to resize it, bigger or smaller, by adjusting percentage or sliding it. So put that back to 100%. So say I wanted to just print this as it is, and I'm happy with the settings I've got here, even though I would not print this using this material or these settings. You then just hit slice. And it's going to do this. Right, so it's saying it's going to take about an hour and 33 minutes to print using 13 grams of filament or 4.5 meters roughly. Again, all of this is very ballpark. If we look in preview, perfect, it has put support in. So this is showing you how it would print. This is the toolpath. So this is the first layer it would print, and these, I should point out, are called supports, because if there is an overhang on the print of more than so many degrees, it can't print in mid-air. So it's going to print like this, and you see here where this support comes in the middle, because it's got this overhang directly between here and here that it needs to fill. So this support won't really even touch this much. It will barely adhere to it, but it will keep it flat and allow the filament to stay where it needs to be. So it bridges the gap and then carries on up. And these supports just snap off easily, and as I say, they barely leave a mark normally. So at this point, you can just save this onto your SD card, slap it in the printer and print it off. And as long as everything's set up, it should print perfectly fine. This might look complicated to some, if you're concerned, but it really isn't. I'll show you things I started printing with and where I've gone with it in just 3 months. Well, actually, it's more like 2 months because my machine's been out for the past 3 or 4 weeks waiting for Creality to get that part. But anyway, you can learn this really quickly. There really isn't that much to it. And it's great because if you make a mistake, so what? It's a little bit of filament. It's not expensive. Just start again. You can start out with no knowledge in any of this. Just take a file, put it in the printer and print it. But as you want to get better, as you want to try and do more complicated things, you're naturally going to find yourself going, well, maybe if I just learn that, maybe if I just learn that. So in the very early days, the very, very first thing I printed was this little rabbit, and this is a test print, as is the little lucky cat. Very famous in 3D printing, as I'm sure you'll come to learn. Then you think, well, maybe I'll try and do something a little bit more complicated, like maybe this Cubone skull from Pokemon. This taught me something. It taught me about orientation. It's very important to think about which way you want to have the print when you're printing it because of overhangs and things like that. Like as I mentioned with that print with the motorcycle grip, if there's an overhang, you need support. So you also can think about the way you're printing something as to whether it will need support or not. And I believe that I was trying to print it this way at first and it just didn't seem to work very well. And then I suddenly thought, well, what if I turn it on its end and print it like that, and had much better results. And these little eureka moments go off in your brain and you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And you start learning more and more. And pretty soon you'll really think about the way that things are orientated, the way you want the strength in the part to be, why you would and wouldn't want to do more infill or less infill. There is a lot to it, but again, you can learn it progressively, and there is tons of stuff out there that people will help you with. Then, of course, there's the super fun stuff, like the articulated things. And this, of course, to a lot of people is quite mind-blowing, is the idea that this printed like this. And I peeled it off the bed, and you break it apart, and it's articulated. All the pieces are joined together. And the way that's done is it's basically got loops like this, which can print, obviously, in layers, and then they're interlocked. Amazing. One of the things that additive printing can do that virtually nothing else can. Casting can do it, but it's difficult. And then there's really articulated things like this little plesiosaur, or dysplesiosaur, because he looks a little bit mad. Chubby crocodiles, little dragons and things. Now, some of these, I didn't really want to print them necessarily. I just wanted to try it because, like with this one, for instance, if you're thinking about overhangs, these wings are a problem. And they didn't come out perfect, but I think there are ways I could get around that. But actually, my printer started going wrong at this print. So, yeah. Skipping through, there's obviously other little things you can do, like the little articulated dinosaurs, and there's a lot of meme stuff. There's a lot of nerd stuff and a lot of meme stuff in the files you'll find, and obviously memes are axolotls have become memes. So you've got little articulated axolotls and cute axolotls, and I'll get back to him. Good transition. And little dinosaurs and Loach. Don't worry, it's an in-joke. And you can also do things like this little wire-framed basilisk. Are you going to focus on that? I think it is. Just about. Hold on. This is printed as a wireframe thing, and there is a little bit of support left inside it. But if you made this bigger, it could look super cool. And stuff like this, with a nice coloured background, as I'll show you with the way I've got stuff set up, you can make things look awesome. A frog. And you can also try different print qualities, such as I say, with this one. So if you look at that, I hope you can see what sort of print quality we're dealing with. And then if you compare it to this, you see how shiny and flat the surfaces are? This is because this is printed at what is known as a super quality. It's basically a smaller layer height to try and be more accurate and have a more consistent sort of finish. And as you can see, that shiny, flat, you wouldn't need to do a thing to it if you wanted to paint it. And of course, because you can scale your 3D prints, you can make them as big, well, not necessarily because of the resolution, but or as small, depending on how small your printer can print, as you like. And this is where I'm going to get into painting models, because this is the thing that I really do enjoy, as you will see. Now, you will notice a theme here. There's things I've printed for myself and painted for myself, and there's things I've printed and painted to give to Reno as a funny little gift. She thinks they're cute. They sit on the side. They're cool. And she loves these. These are her favourite, the baby axolotls. It's too much for her. I painted these, and many of my models, or at least finished them, with basic acrylic paints like this, like, you know, £6 for 24 colours or something. They're fantastic. Of course, airbrushing is way better. Spraying is better. You can even do multicoloured prints these days and stuff like that. But for me, being able to print a little model and just sit there and paint it is so therapeutic, and just, it's fun. And I love teaching myself new skills. So that's why I do this stuff, basically. So I'll show you the other things that I've painted for Reno, the cute things, and then I will move on to the other stuff that I've printed and the more sort of mechanical stuff. So of course there's the cute baby axolotls, and then there's the cute dinosaur series. These I sprayed with rattle cans, full-size rattle cans. And if you've done much spraying, you will work out how you do this. You spray it green, and then you hold it at the right angle, and you can spray it with a white, and then it will naturally fade off the sides. And then I painted the spines, which of course, this sort of dinosaurs didn't have spines. Of course, Stegosaurus did, but not you, mate. That's not the point. They're supposed to be just cute. Cute little dinosaurs. So these are spray painted using cans. These are painted by hand with acrylics, as is our little samurai frog friend here. Now, I'm not really an artistic painter. I can paint with spray paints, and I can do weathering, and I've done a couple of things I'm quite happy with. And this little Spyro, which I tried to give it the crazy eyes from the early PlayStation days. That was painted using acrylic paint only. No spray paints involved with that one. I also printed and painted this Lapras. And another one of Reno's favourites, the Capybara. This is painted using just acrylic paints again, and it's odd that in person this looks like wood. It even sounds a bit like wood, but it's not. It's 3D printed and painted by hand. And then falling into the category of memes, if you recognise this, you probably have terrible internet. So within just a couple of weeks, you can go from printing little things to start printing them and having end results like this, which are fun to do, great little gifts. So these are obviously fun little models. You can also make functional things. Obviously, that's a huge part of 3D printing, is making functional things. So now I'm going to show you my favourite things that I've printed and painted that I think have come out the best, or at least they are what I wanted them to be. So one set of things I like printing is fossil things. This is a slightly smaller than it would be in reality, believe it or not, megalodon tooth. This was, I believe this comes from a 3D scan of an actual tooth. If it doesn't, there are ones that exist. It's not that difficult to get things 3D scanned nowadays. You can even buy consumer handheld things and just scan something and print it. But yeah, this I printed off and painted using acrylics to look like a real fossil, as a thing to have, as a thing to look at. It's kind of cool. And also, I like the fact that you just get the scale of things. And I've found fossilised shark's teeth myself, real ones. That is a 55 million year old fossilised shark's tooth I found myself on the beach a few years ago. I have a video of me finding it. This is just a smaller version of that I printed off. This is the sort of more common size that megalodon teeth are found. But I've clear coated this one, and I don't know. I do like it being shiny. Sometimes the real thing are that shiny, but I feel like this matte texture is probably better, and I could probably go a bit more matte with it. But yeah, anyway. Fossil things are really cool to print. So you got stuff like that. So they're very realistic. This isn't. This is obviously from Jurassic Park. This is the Velociraptor claw, which is massively oversized from what it should be. Hold on. I believe this is a lot closer to how big Velociraptor claws were, even though I think this might be slightly too big. This one is cast out of bismuth metal. I did that myself in a video. Check it out. But it's cool to have the one from Jurassic Park. This is a copy of a Tyrannosaur tooth. Print and own your very own T-Rex skull. This thing is printed as a top half and bottom half, a stick and a base. And then I've just painted it using... oh, by the way, these are painted using spray paint to start with, but then finishing with acrylic. This one was painted with spray paint on the base. This was primed and painted with spray paint, but then I totally painted it and finished it to get the texture and colour right, best I could, for a fossil. Using acrylic paints. But I hope you can see I've got the sheen about right, the way it kind of looks from real fossils. So from fossils to space, this is the moon. No, I mean this is the moon. This is, apart from that bit, ignore that bit. NASA give out lots of free images and videos and things. They have to as part of who they are. And they have turned a lot of those images, scans and stuff that they've collected over the years into 3D printable files, STLs, and this is a true representation of the moon printed off. I don't know whether the moon really is not this round, because it's quite clearly not round when you look at it like this. I don't know if that's like sagging my print or if that really is the shape of the moon, but if that really is the shape of the moon, it's kind of changed my perspective on it somewhat. It's not that round. One thing I would do though is make sure that when you print it, wherever the base is going to be, make that the back side of the moon so you can see the recognisable side. The very first thing I printed and painted that I actually wanted to try and make look good was a Mondo Sharwan from Fifth Element. And I hope I achieved that. I love this little dude. The Mondo Sharwans in Fifth Element are one of my favourite sort of alien races from sci-fi. They had such a small part in it really, but they were just so cool, even though they're ridiculous looking and all of that. I just don't know, I always loved it and I loved that film. So I wanted to print one and paint it, and this has been painted with gold paint, and then I aged it and weathered it using acrylics and painted in the sort of the colour bits where they need to be. So it was bright gold, and I've used washes with acrylics to try and bring that colour down and try and give it the sort of colours it had in the film. Love the little dude, he's awesome. However, I would kind of love to print this a lot bigger, because you'll notice how small the head is in comparison. That is accurate. That is accurate for the film. But if you wanted to print his head to a more likeable size, can you work out just how big that body's going to be? I also printed and painted the key from Fifth Element because it's so cool. I love that film. Some of these are the ones I put the most effort into. The one that probably took me the most amount of time to actually finish was this. This is a mini nuke from Fallout, which I've printed, painted, and hand drilled and screwed real screws in it all over the place. This is my basic attempt at making a good quality little replica to show on display. Printed a base for it. All these files are available for free. Painted that as well to sort of make it stand out. And there you go, a little mini nuke. Now see, how, like, if you've got a friend or something who's really into certain franchises or things, you can spend time to print and paint something like this for someone as a present. And I think they'd really appreciate it more than you just buying some 20 quid thing that, you know, whatever. A bit more weathering could make it look a little bit better, but from a distance, you know, that's fine. Continuing on the sci-fi theme and Fallout is the Red Rocket from Fallout, which is a very cool little model that I printed off and painted. The first version of this I actually did in silver and thought, no, I really should make it the authentic sort of red from Fallout. But because this is modular, the way this all sticks together, I just took the silver one that was on there. You can, you know, turn it into one of those. Now, I mentioned earlier on about how I custom made something myself, and it's nothing special. I made this, which is a little base for that rocket. It was basically a cylinder that I chamfered on the top. I realised when I chamfered it, it chamfered the bottom as well, so I put another cylinder lower down inside it to fill that gap in, and there you go. Now you've made your first CAD STL file. And the idea of this was to put this on top of here and turn this on. And with the lights off, the effect of that with the light underneath it, and you can have this hidden out of the way, is absolutely awesome. And because it's just some little LEDs that I've hot glued, you know, into here, these batteries are going to last weeks, and they're a great way of using up old AAs that haven't got enough power in them that you're really going to use them up. Shove them in here and use them till they're dead. It will last weeks, you'll be amazed. Now, as you may know from some of the videos that I've done, I've collected a few military things over the years. Not expensive, just really unique things that you wouldn't think you could be able to own, but you can easily buy for not a lot of money. Like the wing from a Sidewinder missile. I bought one years ago for like 50 quid. They're a lot more expensive now because my video and Smarter Everyday's video made them somewhat more popular. But for me, it doesn't necessarily need to be an authentic thing. It's just I'm interested in the size and the shape and kind of what it looks like. So to that end, you can print stuff like this. This is just a hand grenade. Of course, this could be used in things like airsoft, although it's not going to make any noise. But this is a functional little model of a hand grenade. If you're in any way concerned about the legalities of this, I can assure you this is completely legal, because you can also buy stuff like this. This is a replica grenade which is made of metal and weighs a lot. That's completely legal to own. If this was real, as in it was a real casing, but had no explosives in it of any sort, it was inert, that again would be completely legal. I could go down the road right now in less than half an hour, buy 10 real deactivated grenades, because I live near a place that sells them. So this is like a cross between the film stuff and the military stuff that I like printing. This is a flashbang from CSGO, which is again a functional thing. You can pull the pin out of it, it comes apart. You can also unscrew it. And this one is again something. Oh, these have been spray painted, by the way. I didn't mention that. This is fully spray painted, even the parts inside. So I've tried to make it as accurate as a reproduction as a model as I can. Kind of thought about weathering it or aging it, but the clean look kind of looks cool. But yeah, again, you can print stuff like that. Now, as I say, I've collected military stuff. This is a 40mm grenade launcher casing and an inert practice head. These will come apart, as you can see, completely inert and legal. But I didn't have the cap for it, so I printed it out. And then I printed it out another one that's just a single model to see how close they are in comparison. And what's interesting is very often if you have a military thing and you have the real version, you'll find that the file isn't quite right. It's close, but it's not quite right, which is kind of amazing when the dimensions are easily available out there. Here's another style that I printed. As cool as it would be to have the real version of this, I don't need the real version of it, and I can print this out and paint it and have fun, and it sits on the side, and you probably never know the difference. You can also go down the meme route with things like this. This is something I made, and I really hope someone gets this joke, because I put pictures of this online, and I don't think anybody got the joke. It's a Mark IV flashbang requise. If you know about the requise meme, this is funny to me. The reason this looks a little bit messed up on the spraying on the front is because I actually made a file that was this in, like, you know, words, and then I printed that onto a very thin piece of plastic, and 3D printed, and then bent it around it, and then spray painted over it. Unfortunately, I should have gone thinner because it kind of kinked in the middle and it left a tiny gap for some paint to get through. But military stuff has always got terrible spray painting on it anyway, so why not? Again, all these things, you can pull the pin, top comes off. There, you could put a big spring in there so it comes off. So this could be used in things like airsoft and stuff like that, although I wouldn't suggest it because it will snap and break quite quickly. But as a thing that just sits there, it's funny. But yeah, the Requise grenade. I'm talking about Sidewinder missiles. I forgot somebody printed this for me and I'm trying to remember who it was. I have a video on it, so if you check that video, his name will be in it. Thank you very much for doing that. This was the first 3D printed thing that I ever painted myself, and it definitely set me up. I knew I was going down that road eventually, and then we got things like this. But yeah, this is a multi-stage missile that I printed and painted, and it's a little model. It's very cool. The biggest thing I have printed is this, and painted, obviously. I actually had to learn to split files. This is where when you just slowly go down the line. First I was learning to print, then I was learning to make things with supports, maybe do something that's multi-part or something like that, and then eventually you're down to creating your own custom files and splitting out other people's, because my printer couldn't print this in one go. You can see the split line here because I used some glue there, and it's shown up a bit more than I was hoping, but because I've pointed it out, you'll notice it. So this part, did I say this was a 40mm Bofors anti-aircraft round? The reason I wanted to print this out is because I wanted to compare it to a real one, because I own a real one. In fact, I have two. This is the casing from a Bofors 40mm, and as you can see, it's not perfect, but it is a very close representation of the thing. I'm going to have to do some moving here. These things are huge. It's not quite right, but it is pretty close. It's a bit too thin, and the base is a bit too thick, but it looks pretty damn close. What was more impressive to me was that this is the round that would have been in it, but I did once find a segment of the body of this, which is here. And you can see exactly where that matches in to that print. The thick part here is normally a brass band, so that's what that's missing. But you can see the taper, the shape, where that groove is the same. This is a real World War II used in anger shell fragment. I find lots of shell fragments all over the place on metal detecting, but I don't often find pieces that big that you can actually see a lot number written into. But I can't see what the lot number is exactly. I've just realised how long this video is probably going to end up being. Look, I'm leaving it full length. I'm nerding out. I'm showing you a passion for something. This thing is awesome. And I've spent less than 300 quid on 3D printing. And that includes the printer. Now, once you have the printer, you're just spending 16 quid every now and then for some filament. Okay, if you're going to paint things, you need paints, but you don't need to buy super stupid expensive paints for doing models. Yes, they are much better and they're nicer, but cheap stuff like this works. Obviously, videos like this take days to film and edit, and while I was editing it, I was trying out a new PLA called Silk, and this is a multicoloured silk, and I have to show you this. I couldn't not include this in this video because this is something that's just really cool. So silk PLAs are like normal PLA, apart from they've got elastomers in them, so they're a little bit more bendy, but they've got this really nice sheen to them, and they tend to get very nice surface finishes on prints. Now, as I say, this one's multicoloured, and if I can get it to focus, hopefully you can see it's blue, green and pink in the cross-section, and those colours run down the length of the filament. So when you print something with this, not only do you get a nice shiny, smooth finish, it also looks iridescent, but it isn't. The colours that you see are where they are, and if you turn it, they don't change colour. See, the blue never turns to another colour, it's always blue, but because of the way it works, it just looks iridescent. This little dragon was printed in place, exactly as it is, no supports, nothing else, just printed flat, like that, and then just peel it off the bed, and just break the pieces apart by moving it, and yeah. How cool is that? Really impressed with that stuff. I'm going to be experimenting with this more. That's why I say if you ever thought about 3D printing, now is a fantastic time to get into it because it's not expensive, the machines are really good, the communities are there to help you, the advice is there, everyone's very passionate about it. It's It's really good. It's very nice to see something like that. And I have experienced that whenever something feels like that, it's normally about to explode into the bigger populace. And I think 3D printing for people at home is maybe getting there. And I would hope that would happen, because that's a great thing. That is people getting a hobby and not just looking at a screen. I have considered doing some videos where I would print a file and paint it in one video, you know, like I do time-lapse fit printing and then show you it being painted and then show you the end result. Occasionally, I've thought about doing that. If you'd like me to do that, then in the comments, maybe suggest some models that you'd like to see printed. Ideally, if you send me a file through, like, you know, from Thingiverse or something like that, through social media, or you can join my Patreon stroke YouTube memberships and get into Discord and tell me about the things there. We have a few people on my Discord who do 3D printing, and they've been a great help to me to learn things where I've got stuck, if I ever did. I've done so much research on this over the years that when it came down to actually doing it, it felt like something I'd already done. So it was really good fun. Anyway, there you go. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.